Cho said, "There is a foundation for the government of the world. It is the ruler's person. There is a model for the government of the world. It is the family. The foundation must be correct. To make the foundation correct, there is no other way than to make the heart sincere. The model must be good. In order for the model to be good, there is no other way than to maintain harmony among kin. It is difficult to govern a family, whereas it is easy to govern the world. For the family is near, while the world is distant. If members of the family are separated, the cause surely lies with women. This is why the hexagram Quay, depart, follows the hexagram Jaran, family. When two women live together, their wills move in different directions. This was why Yao, having put his empire in order, gave his 2 daughters in marriage to Shun, in order to test him and see whether the throne should be given to him. Thus it is that, in order to see how a ruler governs his empire, we must observe the government of his family. In order to see how he governs his family, we must observe how he governs himself. To be correct in one's person means to be sincere in one's heart, and to be sincere in one's heart means to turn back from evil activities. Evil activities represent falsehood. When one turns back from falsehood, there will be no more falsehood in him. Being free from it, one becomes sincere. This is the reason why the hexagram Wu Wang, absence of falsehood, comes after the hexagram Fu, to return. And it is said, the ancient kings made their regulations in complete accordance with the season, thereby nourishing all things. How profound. If one's heart is not sincere, his personal life cannot be correct. If kin are not harmonious, the family cannot be regulated. Those who are near are difficult to handle, whereas those who are distant are easily managed. The Quay hexagram consists of the Tui, pleasure trigram, at the bottom of the Li, separateness trigram, on top. The Tui trigram represents the young woman, while the Li trigram represents the woman at middle age. It is in the nature of the yin or weaker sex to be agreeable and pleasant outwardly but jealous inwardly. Therefore, when they live together, they do not agree. Master Chonghao once said to Emperor Shenzong, 1068-85, to achieve the correctness of the principle of nature and to fulfill the ultimate of human relations is the way of Yao and Shun, whereas to exercise one's selfish mind and to depend on partial application of humanity and righteousness is the way of the despot. The road to the true king is as smooth as a whetstone. It is based on human feelings and revealed in the principles of propriety and righteousness. One proceeds along it straightforwardly as on a highway, without swerving or detour. The despot, however, rocks and turns in a winding path, and in the end it is impossible for him to enter upon the way of Yao and Shun. Therefore, if one sincerely aims at the kingly way, one will become a true king. But if one pretends to be humane and righteous in order to be a despot, one becomes despotic. The two ways are quite different. One must clearly examine their starting point. As it is said in the Book of Changes, an infinitesimal mistake in the beginning will lead to an infinite mistake at the end. One must not fail to examine the starting point. If your majesty will examine the words of ancient sages, realize that the way of Yao and Shun is all complete in yourself. Examine yourself and be sincere, and extend this to reach the 4 seas which surrounded China. The next 10,000 generations will be very fortunate indeed. In the second year of the Xining period, 1069, the teacher was appointed Undersecretary of the Heir Apparent in the Left Secretariat and concurrently a Censor at Large in the Censoriate. He presented a memorial which begins with the activities of the true king and the despot, the difference between the principle of nature and human desires, and the distinction between pure and impure standards of human relations. Master Changyi said, "In handling affairs today, there are three things that must be given first priority, namely, making up the mind, delegating responsibility, and searching for virtuous men to take the responsibility. Although the ruler accepts excellent advice and has an array of good policies, if he does not make up his mind, will he pay attention to them and put them into practice? Although he wishes to put them into practice, if he does not delegate responsibility to his ministers who can take over the policies and execute them. Although the ruler and ministers are united in mind, if those in position are not men of virtue, can they apply those policies to the world? These three things are the base, while their proper application in actual affairs is the foundation. Among the three, making up the mind is the most fundamental. Making up the mind means to be perfectly sincere and single-minded, to consider practicing the way as one's own responsibility, to regard the teachings of the sages as definitely reliable, to look upon the government measures of the ancient kings as definitely practicable, not to follow rigidly the advice of those nearby, nor be influenced or fooled by popular opinion, but to be determined to bring about a world order like that of the three dynasties. Someone asked, why did Master Cheng merely urge the ruler to regard the teachings of sages as definitely reliable, and to bring about a world order like that of the three dynasties? Jushi answered, he could not help putting it that way. In talking to students, we can only teach them to act according to the teachings of sages. When after making some effort they realize something within themselves, they will naturally understand what it really is to be a sage. The text of the fifth undivided line of the P to associate hexagram says, it clearly shows its way of association. The king pursues his game in three directions and allows all animals before him to escape. Master Changyi's commentary says, in associating with the people of the empire, the ruler should clearly show his way of association, to be sincere in his treatment of others, to do to others what he would want to have done to himself, to initiate governmental measures and extend humanity so the people of the empire will be benefited by his kindness, and the like are ways in which the ruler associates with the people of the empire. In this way, who in the world would not associate with and become intimate with their superior? But if he shows off his small kindnesses and violates principle to solicit praise, with the hope that his subjects will associate with him, his way is narrow indeed. How can he succeed in getting the people of the empire to associate with him? The true king clearly shows his way of association, and people of the empire naturally come to be associated with him. As they come, he cares for them. Of course, he will not bestow small benefits to solicit their association. As in the case of hunting in three directions, he will not pursue those animals that escape, but will take those that come to him. This is the greatness of the kingly way. For this reason, his people feel grand and happy, without realizing why they are so. This is not only the way for a ruler to associate with the people of his empire, it is also the way for people to associate with each other in general. Take the case of the minister's association with the ruler. To demonstrate his loyalty and sincerity to the utmost, and to use his ability and energy to the limit, are the means to show his way of association with the ruler. Whether the ruler uses him or not is up to the ruler. He should not try to please and flatter the ruler to seek his association. The same is true of friends. One should cultivate his person, make his will sincere, and wait. Whether others will be intimate with him is up to them. He should not resort to fine words and an insinuating appearance, go off the way to follow them, or carelessly agree with them to seek their association. The same principle is true in the association with fellow members of one's community, relatives, and the multitude. This is the principle of pursuing in three directions and following animals in the front to escape. In ancient times, from lords and great officers down, every man's position matched his merits. He occupied his position for life, for it fulfilled his lot. If his position was not up to his merit, the ruler would promote him. A scholar would pursue his learning. When his learning was complete, the ruler would look for him. In no case would one manipulate for himself. Farmers, artisans, and merchants were diligent at their work, and they lived simply. Therefore each man's mind was fixed and settled, and it was possible for the world to be united in one mind. In later generations, from the common people to the great lords, people turned their minds to glory and honor every day. Farmers, artisans, and merchants turned their minds to wealth and extravagance every day. Millions and millions of people, each with his own mind, compete for wealth. The world is thus in great confusion. How can there be unity? It is hard to see how the world can fail to become chaotic. The text of the second undivided line of the hexagram Tai, peace, says, "Embrace the uncultivated. It is necessary to cross the river without a boat." Master Changyi's commentary says, "It is natural with men that, if rulers take things easy and are careless, government will be remiss. Consequently, measures and systems will be neglected, and the numerous affairs of the state will be out of order. In order to govern, one must possess the capacity to embrace the uncultivated and the unclean. One's administration will then operate at a comfortable pace and will be careful and thorough. Defects will be remedied and things will be taken care of, and the people will be happy with the ruler. If one lacks the capacity to embrace extensively but is instead cross and irascible, he will also lack profound thinking and will have the trouble of being violent. Before his great defects have been removed, his immediate trouble will arise. Therefore, it is important to embrace the uncultivated." From antiquity on, periods of great peace inevitably have been followed by gradual decline. That was due to the fact that rulers were accustomed to ease and comfort and followed routine. Naturally, unless rulers are strong and determined and have the assistance of great heroes, they cannot arouse themselves, stand out, and go forward to carry out reforms. Therefore, it is said that it is necessary to cross the river without a boat. Someone raises the question that whereas earlier one was urged to embrace the uncultivated, which means to be tolerant and lenient, now one is urged to cross the river without a boat, which means to arouse oneself to reform, and that the two seem to contradict each other. He does not realize that what the sages and worthies do is to apply their strength and determination in an all-embracing spirit. The text of the Guan to observe hexagram says, "After the worshipper has washed his hands but has not yet presented his offerings, he shows sincerity and reverence." Master Changyi's commentary says, "The king, being high above, is the model of the world. He must be as extremely grave and serious as the worshipper who has just washed his hands, and is careful not to allow his sincerity to dissipate to any degree as the worshipper who has presented offerings. The whole world will then be extremely sincere with him and reverently look up to him." In the world, whether it is a case of the country or the family or a case of the 10,000 things, the reason why they are not in harmonious union is that something has set them apart. If they are not set apart, they will be in union. Even in the production of heaven and earth and the completion of all things, only union can lead to success. Whenever union is not achieved, it is because something has set them apart. When there is separation or cause for hatred between ruler and minister, between father and son, or among relatives or friends, it is usually because some slander or evil has set them apart. Remove this separation and unite them, and they will be in harmony in all respects, and furthermore, will be in proper order. The symbolism of the hexagram, Shihua, fighting and uniting, is that union is the great function of putting the world in order. The text of the fifth divided line of the Ta Chu Great Accumulation hexagram says, "Take away the force of the hog's teeth, there will be good fortune." Master Chung Yi's commentary says, "There is control among things and there is an objective in human affairs. When a sage gets hold of the essential of things and affairs, he will look upon the minds of millions and millions of people as one. When he tells them to go, they will proceed. When he tells them to stop, they will halt. In this way, he exerts no effort, and yet his empire is governed. His operation is similar to taking away the force of the hog's teeth. A hog is a strong and fierce animal. If one tries to control its teeth by force, one will have to work hard and still will not be able to stop its fierceness. But if one removes its tendency to use its teeth, although the teeth remain, its fierceness will stop by itself. A superior man follows the principle of taking away the force of the hog's teeth. He knows that the evil of the world cannot be suppressed by force. Therefore, he examines its subtle origin, gets hold of its essential element, and stops up its source. Consequently, although he relies on no severe punishment, evil will stop by itself. Take, for example, stopping robbery. People have desires. When they see some gain, they will be moved. If they have not been educated but are driven by hunger and cold, even if punishments and executions are daily applied to them, how can that overcome the desire for gain on the part of millions and millions of people? The sage, however, knows the way to stop those desires. He prefers neither power nor punishment, but promotes governmental measures and education which enable his people to have the occupations of agriculture and sericulture, and to understand the principles of integrity and shame. Even if you were to reward them for it, they would not steal. The text of the J to remove hexagram says, "Advantage will be found in the southwest. If there is no need to go further, there will be good fortune in turning back. If it is still necessary to go on, there will be good fortune in doing so early." Master Chung Yi's commentary says, "The southwest is the direction of the trigram Quyn, earth. The body of Quyn is extensive, large, level, and simple. When the distress of the world has just been removed and people have just started to get rid of their suffering, they should not be governed with harsh and stringent measures, but instead they should be aided with broad, large, and simple ones. Only then will the measures be suitable. After the distress has been removed, there will be peace. That means there is no need to go further. The way of government should now be restored and cultivated. Regulations should be made correct and systems should be made clear, and the government of enlightened kings of the past should be reintroduced. This means to turn back, that is, to return to the correct principle. In ancient times, when sage kings saved people from distress and restored order, at first there was no time to launch governmental measures. As the situation became settled, they were then able to institute measures that could last for a long time. From the Han Dynasty, 206 BC to 220 AD down, however, there was no attempt to do anything after chaos was removed, but merely an effort to maintain the status quo. As a result, good government was not accomplished, for rulers did not know the principle of returning. The sentence, "If it is still necessary to go on, there will be good fortune in doing so early," means that it will be good fortune to remove early whatever should be removed. If anything that should be removed but has not yet been removed is not eliminated early, it will thrive again. If anything that thrives again is not taken care of early, it will gradually become bigger. Therefore, there will be good fortune if it is attended to early. As there are things, there are specific principles. As a father, one should abide in deep love. As a son, one should abide in filial piety. As a minister, one should abide in reverence. All things and affairs have their own abiding points. When people succeed in abiding in their proper abiding points, they will be contented and happy. If they fail to do so, they will be rebellious. The reason why a sage ruler can smoothly govern the world is not that he can invent the principles for them. He only enables them to abide in their proper abiding points. The principle of the Quay pleasure hexagram is to please in the correct way, to obey the principle of heaven, nature, above, and to respond to people's hearts below is the correct and the best way to please. If one should violate the way to seek people's praise, it is to please carelessly. To violate the way is to disobey heaven, and to seek praise is not to respond to the people. It is but to please carelessly for the time being, and it is not the correct way of the superior man. The superior man's way of pleasing the people is like the benefactions of heaven and earth. The people feel them in their hearts and will never get tired of being pleased with him and submitting to him. Things in the world will retreat if they do not advance. They cannot remain still. In the church already accomplished hexagram, the course no longer advances but has come to a stop. But nothing stops forever. For a thing to stop means that its decline and chaos are approaching, for its course is exhausted. Under this situation, what can a sage do? The answer is that the sage alone can handle the abnormal situation in an expedient manner before the course reaches its limit so that it will not be exhausted. Yao and Shun are good examples. This is the reason the course continues to its natural end without disorder. The purpose of setting up a ruler of the people is for him to support and maintain them. The way to do so is to value their energy very highly. When their energy is full, their livelihood will be obtained. When their livelihood is obtained, education and culture will prevail and customs will become excellent. Therefore, in the administration of a government, the important thing is the people's energy. The Spring and Autumn Annals has recorded the cases where the people's energy was expended. In the cases where the undertakings were untimely or violated righteousness, they were, of course, wrong. Those cases that were both timely and righteous have also been recorded to show that putting the people to labor is a serious matter. If rulers of later generations understand this principle, they will be careful with the people's energy. However, there were cases in which the people's energy was greatly utilized, which nonetheless have not been recorded. In this, the sage's idea of teaching people is very deep indeed. Shi 659 to 626 BC repaired the state college and rebuilt the temples of the state. Not that the people's energy was not put to use. These cases are not recorded because the two activities were the great events of returning to the past and restoring what has been neglected. These are the first things in governing the state. Using the people's energy for these purposes is correct. When a ruler understands this principle, he knows the order in which things are to be done and their relative importance. What is concerned in everything from managing the self and regulating the family to bringing peace to the world is moral principles of government. What is concerned in everything from instituting fundamental laws of government, differentiating and rectifying the various offices of government, and starting various activities according to the seasons, to creating institutions and establishing systems, thus covering all the affairs of the world, is methods of government. The way in which the sage governs the world consists of these two items alone. Moral principles are the foundation of government, while methods are the instruments of government. Neither should be overemphasized or neglected. However, the foundation must first be established. Only then can instruments be employed. Chong Hao said, "Ancient kings governed the world with moral principles, whereas later generations have merely controlled the world with laws and orders." In government administration, there must be laws and regulations. The first piece of business is to appoint the various officers. The reading of moral admonitions by local officials, the leveling of prices, and the careful check of weights and balances must not be omitted. Only when people are affectionate to their parents can they be affectionate to others beyond their parents. Chung Kong said, "How do I know the men of virtue and talent so that I may raise them to office?" Confucius said, "Raise to office those whom you know. As to those whom you do not know, will others neglect them?" From this we can see how small Chung Kong was in the exercise of his mind and how great the sage was in the exercise of his. Extend this principle and we will realize that one thought is enough to ruin a country and one thought is enough to uplift a country to prosperity. The difference lies in whether one is impartial or selfish. Chung Kong was worried because it was impossible to know all the virtuous and talented men of the time. Hence, Confucius gave him this answer. Chung Kong wanted to raise the men of virtue and talent throughout the world on the basis of one person's knowledge. He therefore thought there were not enough such men. The Grand Master, however, wanted the men of virtue and talent throughout the world to raise all other such men. Therefore he knew there were plenty. Such is the difference between the selfish and the impartial exercise of the mind. When this difference is extended to the extreme, it can lead to ruining the country in one case and to uplifting the country in the other. Someone said, "Master Chung said that by looking at Chung Kong and the sage, we know how great or small they were in the exercise of their minds. From this we know that joyfully taking example from others to practice virtue was how Shun became a sage. If in everything one wants to have his own wishes, he is truly a selfish, inferior man." Jushi said, "From this we can see how small or great sages and worthies are in the exercise of their minds." Chung Kong said what he said simply because his knowledge was not very broad. The capacity of one's mind is originally great. It becomes small because of selfishness. When the mind becomes extremely beclouded and obstinate, it can ruin a country. Someone asked, "Is it not true that Chung Kong wanted to raise men of talent himself, whereas the sage wanted everyone to do so?" Jushi answered, "Chung Kong was merely short-sighted. Being short-sighted, he fell into selfishness. Students have raised doubts because Master Chung went to the extreme in talking about uplifting or ruining a country, but he merely meant that it would be true if the principle was extended to apply to governing a country." Chunyi. The way of government may be discussed from the aspect of its fundamentals or from the aspect of its practical affairs. From the aspect of its fundamentals, it is nothing but rectifying what is wrong in the ruler's mind, and rectifying one's mind in order to rectify the minds of the officials at court, and rectifying the minds of the officials at court in order to rectify the minds of the various officers. From the aspect of its practical affairs, nothing needs to be done if the ruler does not want to save the country. If he wants to save his country, he must effect changes. A great change will yield great benefit, and a small change will yield small benefit. Although the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907, may be described as peaceful, nevertheless it still had a barbarian atmosphere. The three bonds were incorrect, and the proper relations between the ruler and the minister, between the father and the son, and between the husband and the wife disappeared. All this originated with Taisong, 627 to 49. Consequently, the young people of later generations could not be used. The ruler no longer fulfilled the function of a ruler, and the minister no longer fulfilled the function of a minister. As a result, regional commanders no longer came to court, and powerful ministers were defiant. As the situation degenerated, there came the chaos of the succeeding 5 dynasties, 907 to 960. The government of the Han dynasty was superior to that of the Tang. While in the Han the basic bonds were correct, and in the Tang, the various governmental measures were carried out. In this dynasty, the basic bonds are correct, but the various governmental measures have not been completely carried out. Changhao. If teachers cultivate the people's good mind, evil will naturally disappear. If rulers lead the people with reverence and deference, rivalry will naturally stop. Master Ming Tao said, there must be the ideas expressed in the Quan Sui, hark, the fish hawk, and the Lin Chi, the feet of the unicorn, before the laws and systems of the Chou Quan, offices of Chou, can be put into practice. The Quan Sui and the Lin Chi are both poems in the first section of the Book of Odes. King Wen's consorts possessed the virtues of ladylike reserve and modesty, and therefore court poets wrote the Quan Sui poem to praise them. The descendants of King Wen possessed the nature of love and earnestness, and therefore poets composed the Lin Chi poem to compare them with the virtuous animal. The offices of Chou were the 6 offices described in the rites of Chou, and laws and systems mean regulations and institutions of music and ceremonies. To influence people with virtue is the foundation of government, while laws and systems are the instruments of government. When both are applied to help each other, government will flourish. But there must first be the idea before the laws can be put into practice. Otherwise, if there are selfish desires inside, it will be impossible to try to practice humanity and righteousness outside. Mencius said, virtue alone is not sufficient for the exercise of government, and laws cannot operate by themselves. Master Chung once said, in government administration there must be laws and regulations, the careful check of weights and balances, the reading of moral admonitions, and the leveling of prices must not be omitted. He also said, there must be the ideas expressed in the Quan Sui and the Lin Chi before the laws and systems of the Chou Quan can be put into practice. He was talking about Mencius' doctrine. Someone asked, there must be the ideas of the Quan Sui and the Lin Chi before the laws and systems of the Chou Quan can be put into practice. Does this merely mean that there must be sincerity of the will so one can always be trusted? Jushi answered, beginning with the small and intimate life with one's wife, one must accumulate and spread his overflowing influence so that not a single person or a single thing in the world can escape it. Only then can one put into practice the laws and systems of the Chou Quan. Chengyi. If the ruler is humane, all will be humane. If the ruler is righteous, all will be righteous. Whether the world is peaceful or chaotic depends on whether the ruler is humane or not. If he departs from humanity and becomes wrong, whatever arises from his mind will be harmful to his government. Is it necessary to wait till he has it acted out? Mencius saw the king of Chrit 3 times and did not mention governmental affairs. His pupils were puzzled. Mencius said, I first of all attack his evil mind. Only when the mind is correct can affairs of the world be put in order. When there are mistakes in government or wrong appointments to government positions, the ruler who knows them will correct them, and the straightforward minister will admonish the ruler. When the evil mind has been retained, if there is only a single mistake, the situation can be saved and the mistake corrected. But there can be no salvation from the many mistakes that will follow. To rectify what is wrong in the ruler's mind so that it is always correct, who but the great man can do it? Changsai said, when Confucius talked about ruling a country of 1,000 chariots, he did not mention ceremonies, music, punishment, or governmental measures, but instead said, be economical in expenditure and love the people. Employ the people at the proper seasons. He meant that if this is done, laws will operate. Otherwise, laws cannot operate by themselves. Ceremonies, music, punishment, and governmental measures are but specific items of systems. When laws are established and obeyed, virtue will continue for long and our heritage will be great. The licentious songs of the state of Chung and the talk of clever people could make the ruler lose whatever moral principles he held on to. Therefore, Confucius wanted rulers to banish the songs and keep far away from the clever talkers. In reply to Fan Sunche's letter, Master Hung Chu said, "Rulers consider the learning of the way and the methods of government as two different things. This is something that has given us concern from ancient times on. Suppose Confucius and Mencius were alive today. Would you say that they would extend what they had learned and apply it to the world, or would they reluctantly apply what they did not care to do to the world?" When the learning of the way and the methods of government are divorced, both of them will be wrong. If Confucius and Mencius were alive today, they certainly would extend what they had learned and apply it to the world, and they certainly would not consider the methods of government to be none of their business and reluctantly apply them to the world. Generally speaking, rulers and prime ministers regard being parents to the world as the kingly way. If they cannot extend this parental mind to the people, can their way be called the kingly way? What is called the parental mind is not merely shown in words. It must regard the people within the four seas as its own children. If all within the four seas are treated like one's own children, the methods of government will certainly not consist of a poverty of kindness as in the cases of the Qin, 221 to 206 BC, and the Han, or a pretense of practicing humanity and righteousness as in the cases of the five despots. Please tell the officers at court, it is not enough to remonstrate with the ruler for the wrong employment of ministers, or to blame him for the mistakes in government. If they can enable their ruler to love the people in the world as his infants, the virtue of his rule will be daily renewed. People presented to serve the government will be talented scholars. The way of ancient kings and emperors will be fulfilled without going astray, and both the learning of the way and the methods of government will be achieved without a divided mind. This is to say that learning and the methods of government cannot be separated. If separated, both will become wrong. The learning of Confucius and Mencius is the same as their achievements. To manifest the clear character is fundamental, and to give new life to the people is secondary. But the fundamental and the secondary are basically one thread that runs through all. When there is the total substance, there will surely be the great functioning. Only when the ruler possesses the character of heaven can he practice the kingly way. If rulers and prime ministers regard being parents to the world as the kingly way, they will love the people as infants. They will regulate the land system and reduce taxes in order to make them rich, and will promote education and make clear ceremonies and moral principles in order to teach them. They will not repeat the cruelty and the poverty of kindness of the Qin and the Han, or the five despots' manipulation for profit under the pretense of practicing righteousness. If the mind of sincerity and love is earnestly and compassionately realized, the virtue of government will be daily renewed, and those in office will all be talented scholars. There are not two minds, one for today's method of government and the other for everyday learning.